Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the special city council meeting for Monday, April 15th. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kusumoto.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Churko.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Councilmember Hasselbrink.
Here.
Thank you. So well, we have special orders of the day. The first one is item 3A, and City Manager, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. This is a continued item or a follow-up item from last week's special meeting that we had. It's to go over general fund budget gap closure options that have been discussed and recommended by the Budget Standing Committee to reduce the fiscal year preliminary 2019-2020 gap that we have, general fund gap, or the difference between the expenditures and the revenues. And so Maria Luisa has put together a summary and a PowerPoint. We have the standing committee and staff ready to answer questions. We want to succinctly, but also provide details to you on what are in the measures that have already been incorporated into the budget to reduce the gap, and then the additional items that the Budget Standing Committee is recommending either on the revenue side or on the expenditure savings side to reduce the gap down to where it is proposed, if all is approved, down to $64,700. And with that introduction, I'll hand it over to Maria Luisa Valdez, the Finance Director.
So as a summary, last month we went over the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2019-20, and our general fund operating expenditures exceeded our revenues by $482,510, and that is what our budget gap we are projecting for the next fiscal year is. So we were meeting with the Budget Standing Committee, and we came with the recommendations coming forward. They came up with these budget gap measures, as you can see, that are detailed in the report as well. There's the master fee CPI increase, which is favorable to the city, and that generates about $19,000 there. Then there's also some changes in estimates for property tax. Increases or decreases our budget gap by $15,000. So as you see here, it goes from $482,000. And then there's also changes in assumptions for personnel, changes in that happen in the Finance Department and the Development Services Department for different positions on there. So that creates more of a savings for the next fiscal year. There's also City Clerk, a reduction of election expense, which was also provided by the Budget Standing Committee, and that is a reduction of $40,000 for the next fiscal year. So we took that out of the fiscal year 2019-20 budget. And that is a given $99,610,000 that would reduce the budget gap from $482,000 to $382,000.
Okay, so hang on a second. So any questions from council on this part of it? Richard? Okay, thank you.
No.
And the rest is provided. We were provided with direction from the Budget Standing Committee, and we went forward with department overviews discussing how the police department would do a reorganization of their department. Also discussed some potential savings with their step increases, changes in assumptions. But with our reorganization, as we discussed last week as well, as part of the department overview, we discussed having a vacancy for the motor officer position, which would generate about $132,000 in the general fund. So that would decrease the budget gap. And then also using a retired annuitant for half the year, which is at the bottom. And we wouldn't pay the benefits associated with that department, with that position for half the year. So that would generate about $28,000 in savings there. And as I mentioned, those two in between are more assumption changes and more realistic approaches as we're going into the fiscal year 2019-20 budget. So that's what generates the police department. They also, as discussed last week, recommend an additional transfer from PSAF, so I'm kind of going out of order, but going up, the PSAF, the Public Safety Augmentation Fund, and the SLES Fund, the Supplemental Law Enforcement Service Fund. Additional transfers from those, but those would be used specifically for overtime, and we have identified that would be part of the police department overtime, so that would supplement that, and that generates about $30,000. So the police department as a whole, it's a total of $257,900. And then there's also an inclusion of $60,300 for including the hotel revenue, the TOT revenue, UUT, and property tax associated with the new hotel for a quarter of fiscal year 2019-20. So that would bring, if those modifications are accepted and approved by City Council, that would bring our budget gap to $64,700. We'll continue to work with the Budget Standing Committee. We also do have $220,000 that the Budget Standing Committee and City Council set aside from fiscal year 2017-18, and that was set aside for the fiscal year 2019-20 gap. But we have, as much as possible, tried to reduce the budget gap, just create a balanced budget. And once we've exhausted that form, then we also do have that $220,000 that was set aside in September. Or we could also use fiscal year 2018-19 projected surplus for this fiscal year to close the remaining gap. Do you have any questions?
So I do, if I can start off. So on the hotel TOT potential, is that based on some kind of a, from the consultant from HDL? Is that kind of look?
It's based on, yes, the hotel rate that we're assuming, and that was based on JLL from a couple of years ago. We can, based on discussions with the Development Services Director, we have, we think maybe the occupancy rate would be a little lower, so we have reflected that change. But other than that, it's coming from JLL.
Oh, not HDL.
Oh, HDL is our property tax and sales
Okay.
tax consultants.
This is from JLL, and that, okay. Now, on that one, that is contingent on the one on Sausalito being, or Serpentine, right? That being complete? Is that the?
That's correct.
Okay. And then it'll be for June, May, April of next year, the last quarter, okay. And then we feel good about that, I guess?
In talking to Les and his experience in dealing with Marriott in his past life, he was very, felt good about this.
Okay.
It was conservative, it was realistic.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, Council.
Yeah, is a motor officer position savings, is that just realizing we're not going to be at full force anyway, or are we actually just making a conscious decision to be down one officer for the year?
That's realizing we're not going to be at our full complement.
Okay,
And also, even if we got to a full complement of what we call core level services, we won't have anybody that's able to be trained and be broken away from regular core level services that we provide, either patrol, detect, investigations, because they'll to go away to do the motor training. So we won't be able to fill that position for at least a year.
okay, thank you.
Any questions?
On that same point, that also, on the same point, that also means that there's no revenue being produced by the motor as well, correct?
That's correct. The whatever revenue that would have been generated by a traffic officer issuing citations won't be present. But I think if, and I don't have it in front of me now, but I know that the revenue generated by citations and penalties have actually were much better reflected than they were the year prior.
Okay. And is that position also part of the STAR program, or is that someone else?
The person that was riding that motor is on the STAR program, but he's still on the STAR program as a patrol officer.
So we transferred him off from that program into the field as a patrol officer.
Yeah, as a patrol officer, but he's able to respond for the STAR, the serious traffic accident response unit he's able to respond at, whatever, if he would have been a detective, he's still able to respond and operate as a member of the STAR team.
And that position also has, I don't know what the word, they're different benefits, different salary posts, they get a percentage because they're working the motor.
They get a 5% assignment pay, special assignment pay, which is pretty much all the special assignments would get that, but yeah, yes, sir.
So he's not getting that in patrol?
not working, he's no longer assigned to the motor, so he doesn't get that 5% for motor pay.
The other question, and I talked with Maria Luisa earlier today, and I'm a little confused, as I explained to her, the 2017-18 surplus, the 220,000 that's showing up now, was apparently recommended by the Budget Standing Committee, and the City Council approved that, I believe you said last September.
That's correct.
I don't understand why that's showing up if that was already committed and dedicated to the retirement program. Are you putting it there? And, you know, maybe Brett, you can answer it. Are you putting it there because we're not going to do that now?
It was, at this point in time, and it's a fluid budget, preliminary 1920, but it's true that the Budget Standing Committee and the City Council approved spending the fiscal year 17-18 surplus, which was 220,000, setting it aside for pension and closing an anticipated gap for 1920. And so as we've gone through the process with the Standing Committee wanted to try to make every effort to close the budget gap before using the 220,000, and that is what is in front of you here. So we're able to work with the Standing Committee and staff and bring this down without yet using the 220,000. And we've got it down to 64,700 right now. So we still have that possibility. The Standing Committee wanted to use it last. I think that's the fiscally prudent thing to do.
Okay. And the projected balance for 18-19 surplus is 299,400.
Yes, we, when we went to mid-year, we had a projected surplus of this fiscal year, estimated revenues over estimated expenditures, right around 500,000. The council has given direction to staff to spend 200,000 of that this year on the police lockers. We're going through that evaluation right now, so about 300,000 is left. We talked to the Standing Committee at the last meeting about using that, first of all, they want us to bring back a list of additional capital needs to them, fully vetted out, so that they can evaluate that. They can bring it back with their recommendation to the City Council. And so we've talked about using one-time revenues, which that is for this fiscal year, on one-time capital needs, which we desperately need. So we would be simultaneously taking care of capital needs that we have here that we are identifying and vet those out, take them to the Standing Committee, take it to the full council and spend the one-time monies on that while we're going through the long-term fiscal sustainability and developing that plan.
Okay. Well, for me personal, I think the 220 has already been voted on and approved by prior council, so I don't see us being able to dip into that and that being used for the intent that it was originally established. If we've got to still find the 64,000, it may need to come from the projected for this year unless something else comes up. And I asked the question earlier and they didn't have an answer with the Epson product going in next door. There was comment about a customer service and equipment demo area that was going to be part of that. If that's the case, and maybe repairs too, I'm not sure, have we looked into the potential that there may be a point of sale coming out of that operation?
We talked to them about it early on when Les and I met with their staff, and there's really very little direct point of sale coming out of that site. That's my answer. I don't really think there's going to be sales tax generated. What there is going to be, and we talked to HDL about the economic outcome or the economic output of what can come out of there, the intangible, and HDL is recommending, they're not recommending, but they're estimating about $100,000 in terms of sales tax generated out in the community. We will get some property tax, some utility users tax out of the site as well, but nothing direct point of sale.
That's all, and I appreciate Maria going through this with me this morning, so I understood it a little bit better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? So I guess back to us, it's just, what, is it receive and file, or we actually have to provide a motion and?
If you, I mean, it's a fluid process, like I said, this is the recommendation from the standing committee at this time. If you want to bless that now, that concept as we're going through this, and we
In
can
what,
focus
in
in.
what form would you want? Motion, second, vote?
Yeah, I
Is
think
that-
it would be, that
okay.
would be
All right,
appropriate.
let's, is there a motion?
And,
Oh.
Yeah, and just
Okay.
to be clear, we're going to move forward just as it relates to those budget gap measures, correct? Not in terms of closing the final 64,000.
Right, yeah, the 64,000 will continue to dialogue with you as the standing committee and with the full council.
We need to make a motion that's very clear like that. I think
Okay.
That's appropriate.
I'll make a motion that we move forward with these budget gap measures to reduce the current budget gap deficit for 1920 down to $64,700.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, it passes 5-0. Okay, next item we have on the agenda is closed session. There'll be 2 items if we have sufficient time. If not, we will continue to the regular meeting. But City Attorney, if you can take us into closed session?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The City Council will now adjourn into closed session to discuss items listed on your agenda as 4A and 4B.